Okay, excuse me. Looks like well, it's already 1 o'clock, and I want to just be cognizant of everybody's time, respectful of your time. So we're going to start the session. I am very pleased to welcome you to this panel on water management, and I'm Jeanette Dubinin. I'm the Director of Resilience and Adaptation at the Center for Planning Excellence here, and this is my 12th summit, so I've done this for quite some time. But before we begin, I wanted to thank our summit sponsors, the ones that are listed in your program, and the ones that are also on the slideshow as you go from room to room and see what's up there. We really couldn't have done it without them, and we're very grateful for them. So, if you have been to the summit, maybe once or twice or as often as I have, you probably are aware that this year's summit has certain a theme that we will go with, and I think that's not new, but it's similar and the same, but it does include water this time. So the themes are climate, health, equity, and resilience, and water is an important part in all of those themes. And like I said, if you've been with us at the summit, you probably know that we covered water management and water-related stuff every single year. And so I just want to pull out some examples. In 2009, we've highlighted efforts such as the Dutch dialogues and the urban water plan, and examples such as the green infrastructure at various scales from New Orleans to Houston. And they had session descriptions like using water in smart ways to avoid problems, save money, and increase value. I think that is all still true today. And I'm very excited to hear later from Jessica Dandridge about her work in New Orleans and the next steps needed for the long-term success, equity, and resilience when it comes to water management altogether. And then in 2016, we zoomed out and featured a session titled Louisiana-Texas Dialogue, which was about resilience through green infrastructure along the Gulf Coast. And then in 2018, we held a regional watershed workshop, and in 2020, this was virtual, we discussed green infrastructure in the Delta. So the water management aspect is often discussed through dialogues and green infrastructure, which is neat. And what I also like about it is that there's actually not so much an evolution of the language, but an evolution of the practices that ensue with it. And that brings me to our other speaker, Kelia Bingham, who will talk about water management projects and practices in the Acadiana region, which is taking a different approach, and I'm very excited to hear more about that. So, I'm going to introduce our speakers real quickly. Kelia Bingham is a planner, too, with the Acadiana Planning Commission. She's the watershed coordinator for Region 5 of the Louisiana Watershed Initiative and the project manager for the Acadiana Regional Gauge Network. Kelia's professional background spans 25 years and includes federal, state, and local experience in overall watershed management, environmental education, nature-based solutions, stormwater regulation, and coastal Louisiana processes. She previously worked with the Coastal Wetlands Planning and Protection Act, Lafayette Consolidated Government, Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, and as a high school math and science teacher. She lives in Lafayette with her husband of 16 years, their 8-year-old daughter, and 5 very spoiled cats. Jessica, who's going to go after Kelia. Jessica is the executive director of the Water Collaborative and has dedicated her life to community advocacy and campaign development for organizations seeking to be socially, economically, and culturally inclusive. She focuses on community-led adaptation and mitigation as the core to water justice and climate resiliency strategies. Jessica has led a movement around water management as a tool for social and economic liberation that should be transformational to our most vulnerable communities. And she has many, many, many accolades that I am not listing here. You can definitely find for the sake of time. So let's start.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, this is on. All right. How are y'all doing? You're having a good conference. I wasn't able to attend yesterday, but I really enjoyed the sessions today. So it's great to see you here today. I'm going to go over a little bit about the Acadiana Planning Commission. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. So we serve the public sector in the planning, implementation, economic, community, transportation, development, and implementation throughout the region known as Acadiana, which is mostly composed of rural parishes. In 2016, we've been involved with watershed coordination, including stormwater management. And a theme I kind of want to stress today is that water quality and water quantity do tie or go hand in hand. So stormwater management also has to be comprehensive, whether you're in urban, suburban, or rural areas. So as part of Acadiana Planning Commission's comprehensive economic development strategy, we're building resiliency planning and strategic capacity to mitigate the impact within our economies and our infrastructure, whether it's a man-made or natural disaster. So we want to maximize the natural function of floodplains. This is an ongoing theme. Enhance disaster response capacity and develop alert systems that could be used for local government officials in terms of disasters. Okay, sorry. But I went a little too far there. Okay. Well, a little personal background I wanted to give about myself. So I'm from the big city of Ville Platte in Evangeline Parish. My grandparents were farmers, so cotton, soybean, cattle, horses, sheep, chickens. They lived and worked on their farm. Now, my dad's parents, they had a farm and they had horses, but they also had a grocery store, and he was a barber. So I kind of joke, you get your groceries and your hair done in one stop, and that was, before like a one-stop shopping. And this was a very rural grocery store. All my grandparents' first language was Cajun French. My maternal grandfather, who was born in 1916, at the ripe old age of 7, had to quit school to go work on the farm. But yet he spoke 2 languages. And I have a master's degree and can only speak 1 language. So I just think what he could have done if he had that opportunity. But it was a hard life, right? Physically hard and sure emotionally hard as well. But the land, the water, that's in our blood. And especially in my Cajun family. And so stormwater management or ecology is important to me. So it's also very personal. So why do we need the stormwater management in the rural and suburban areas? Everything's connected, right? Whether you're in the city or the country, that storm drain or ditch will go to your bayou, to your river. And if there's flooding in the city, eventually it's going to get to your rural areas. So that's just kind of the theme I want to drive home. Also, I had this picture. I might have not had the recent updated slide. I didn't get to show you the picture, but in our watershed basin, we don't want any flooding, obviously, to occur, but sometimes it happens. And I had this photo of, it looked like a waterway, but it actually is a flooded road. So what's also important for stormwater management is that we want to save people, right, to get a harm's way from life and property, but also, obviously, not to flood, but if we have to, we want to minimize any damage. So going back to APC, kind of prioritizing this comprehensive stormwater rural management. After the floods of 2016, Acadiana kind of got together at the, the person who spearheaded it was former St. Martin Parish President Guy Cormier. And so he got the following parishes together and said, we need to do something. We have this horrific flooding, this rainfall event, it just did not stop, so what can we do? So through kind of collaboration of the local parish governments having this dialogue, at the same time FEMA was conducting like a watershed study. And there was floodings also in March of 2016 in the northern part of our state that was also affected. And then in August of 2016 was, South Louisiana got much of that. My mother-in-law, they live in Prairieville, and they had like 18 inches in their house. So I know some of you have been affected. We've all been affected by the flooding of 2016. So with this FEMA study, they had money, which was very exciting. So they had $25 million of one pot of funds available. And so the Acadiana Planning Commission kind of steered that, and they developed with the help of technical expertise like criteria to go through these projects. And 8 projects were selected. Most of them are like drainage improvements, retention ponds in the area. Those projects are underway. One of the projects was the Acadiana Regional Gauge Network. So I have this graphic here where, also, Acadiana Planning Commission, we're the fiscal agent for the Louisiana Watershed Initiative Region 5. So if you look here, the red outline, that's all of Region 5's parishes. And the blue parishes are the one within the Acadiana Regional Gauge Network. And this is a Acadiana Planning Commission effort with our partners. We have the UL Louisiana Watershed Flood Center and the Test Vermilion Freshwater District that are working on this project. So, and right now we're very excited. This is since 2017. Next week, hopefully, we should have the RFP advertised. That's a long time. So FEMA funds are slow, right? Getting this project off the ground was also a little harder because the Acadiana Planning Commission, we weren't a parish government. We didn't have like ourselves a hazard mitigation plan. But we got through it. We got approval. FEMA didn't give us a notice to proceed on this project until July of 2020. So we've kind of been trying to rock and roll as much as we can. We've been getting a lot of permits. The permitting process, that's new to me, so that's really fun. Those have been through it. A lot of T's to cross and I's to dot. But this is a 8-parish project, and we included St. Mary project. Acadiana Planning Commission has like St. Landry, Evangeline, Acadia, St. Martin, Lafayette, and Vermilion. So now we added St. Mary. And with the help of the UL Watershed Flood Center, and we went through each parish and had these collaborative meetings basically saying, hey, y'all know where you need rain gauges or flow gauges, so tell us some areas that you would like this to be. So we got local input from them in collaboration, with the researchers at UL. So basically through all that, we developed, this is on our website, a GIS application. Again, no gauges have yet been installed. We're hoping after the RFP and there's a decision made that maybe the first quarter of next year we'll have like one of the first gauges installed. But we have 100 sites and then 38 alternate sites. These are all been approved by FEMA, which is great. And we did the alternate sites because, once you get in the field, if something's not feasible, we can move to another location. But the idea of this, going back to after the 2016 floods and the parish governments getting together, they needed data. Okay, so we want to make science data-driven decisions. And this started off to have this Acadiana Regional Gauge Network to be more for local disaster response, enhancing that capacity. So if the Director of Public Works looks at a gauge and this road is flooding, you can at least put out some warning signs. So we're not stopping flooding with this data, but at least we can maybe help people have alternate routes. So there's some sort of forecasting beforehand. And then also this data could supplement, Louisiana Watershed Initiative has a gauge network that's only 100 gauges throughout the state. These are your larger water bodies. So with the Acadiana Regional Gauge Network, this be a more finer kind of granular data that could supplement the state gauge network. And then also each region is working on watershed models. DOTD is handling that through various contractors. And so hopefully this data can also be tied into the watershed model. Okay, so going back to, we're a fiscal agent for LWI Region 5, and as you know, water doesn't obey boundaries. So we have some parishes are fully in Region 5, some are not. There's a lot of parishes in different regions. Some of you might have heard me say this before. I always say God bless Repeats Parish because they're in 4 different watershed regions, but they make every effort, Mr. Matt Johns, to attend the meetings, and he's very active, so we appreciate their input. Talking about stormwater management and being comprehensive, and also, again, we're in a more rural area. Through our Region 5, through APC's efforts, we wanted to have another tool. So we have a GIS repository, basically a comprehensive project inventory that our parishes have inputted. And we do have a GIS analyst. My coworker Alicia does a great job, and we're trying to go through quality control before we put this out on the website. So we do have a link that can show projects, regional projects that have been completed. Those are active, even conceptual. Then we took it a step further. we have to collaborate again, across boundaries, across parish lines. So at our steering committees, we have a subcommittee, a capital improvement program subcommittee. So our parishes are getting together, they're presenting their projects, either active completed or some conceptual, they're waiting for funding. And so during this presentation, it's collaborative and they're talking. So we're kind of learning from each other. Oh, what did you do in your parish? Maybe we can do that. Oh, also, this project is helping, mitigate flood in our area, but actually, when you look at it, we're actually helping to mitigate flood in, St. Landrew Parish. So it's also looking at benefits to their parish and other parishes. So I'm really proud of our steering committee. Okay, so kind of taking a step back, going towards our farmers and agricultural lands. So these are soybeans, right? Some of you might be familiar with that. Growing up in Evangeline Parish, I saw soybeans and cotton fields in my backyard. Very, very important agriculture. So farmers play a role. If we don't have farmers, we don't have food. And also, agricultural land can play a role in flood retention. So some of these fields, sugarcane, just wanted to put in some nice pictures there. Let's go back to the crawfish pond. Okay, so we rotate crops with rice and crawfish, if you're familiar with that. And these sometimes actually farmers want to use ideally surface water to irrigate their farms. Just kind of wanted to make you aware. So most of our drinking water comes from aquifers, and so you don't want to. Who wants to dig a well in their land to irrigate their farm, their fields? Sometimes you have to, but sometimes farmers have maybe overdid this, and so they were drawing down too much from our aquifer. That could eventually interfere with our drinking water supply, but also cause saltwater intrusion, which is a whole nother issue. So depending, if you can get surface water irrigation, especially in rice fields, they said they get water, there's sediment loading in the water, but the rice fields can actually, when it's harvested, it's taking some of the sediment out of the water, and so what's running off the fields is clear. So you're actually improving some water quality just in terms of sediment load. But also with crawfish and rice fields, for our steering committee, we had Mr. Alex Gilry. He's a consultant. He's the engineering Blue Wing consultant who attends our meetings regularly, and brought to our attention that there's a practice basically when fields are fallow, when they're not being used, your rice fields or crawfish fields, those could be used as retention. And if there's a way to retain that water, flood waters, right, rainwater, but slowly release it, you're improving water quality, and then you're not increasing any flood conditions. So our agricultural community is definitely important to flood mitigation as well. This is just a nice cotton field because I grew up and there was cotton behind my fields in my backyard. So I like quotes, and this is a good one from Helen Keller. So alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And that's what the collaboration is about. And I know a lot of you do this, right? And that's like people are throwing the term resilient. Yes, we're resilient, collaborative in communication, but it's true. It might be a little kumbaya, but we do need it. If we're not talking, then we're not making change or having any solutions. And the whole point of looking at a watershed as something that we are all part of and connected is very, very important. So just want to highlight some current work APC, Canadian Planning Commission, is doing. We went through the Watershed Initiative. Again, we have those constant partnerships with our parish governments and police juries. And basically, if anyone wants to hear me talk, I was at a Rotary Club meeting in Abbeville yesterday. I will spread the word to anyone who wants to listen to me. We have our partners with the Tesh Freshwater Districts, part of the Gauge Network, but they also serve in our steering committee, ex officio members. And then University of Louisiana's Watershed Flood Center, we have Dr. Imad Habib, who's in our steering committee, a part of the Gauge Network. He's done some modeling of the Vermilion River. There's a project with the Natural Science Foundation about communicating flood risk, which is also very important. Then we also have Dr. Robert Miller, who is also works at the UL Watershed Flood Center. I just want to brag on our expertise in our region because Dr. Miller has been appointed by the president to the Mississippi River Commission, which is very exciting. We have our HMGP funds. Those pot of funds is $25 million that we're trying to maximize with the Gauge network. And then also, future expansion. You'll get all this funding that's coming down, which is good to have this grant money available, but we want to use it correctly and wisely. And again, we really want to focus on making that data-driven science decisions. Going back to farmers and making science decisions, I wanted to say, again, like when we talked to the parish governments for the Acadiana Regional Gauge Network, they knew where to put those gauges, what areas flood, where they need that data. Our farmers are landowners, they know their land. And so marrying their expertise with the data, to me, is just a great solution for overall stormwater management. Also, in our area, Acadian Planning Commission, the Army Corps of Engineers has a program called Silver Jackets. And they had, through the Silver Jackets, something called Floodplain Management Services for non-structural technical assistance. And we'll be getting this technical in-kind assistance from the Army Corps to help with a regional watershed plan. So we're very excited about that. Also, I want to talk about the National Flood Insurance Program. Some of you are very familiar with it. You have to have flood insurance. There's been a lot going on. Risk rating 2.0, flood insurance rates are skyrocketing. Some people can't even afford flood insurance. But the National Flood Insurance Program has something called the Community Rating System. Now, communities can participate, city or parish government. It's voluntary, it's an incentive-based program, and basically give you credit for what you're doing for flooding, whether that's like a pamphlet, having a website, having local ordinances or regulations, and there's a whole section on stormwater. So we're trying to increase participation in the community rating system, especially in our rural areas and parishes that just don't have that capacity. So we have a user group, a community rating system user group called RAIN, Regional Acadiana Information Network. We've had probably 5 or 6 meetings. Again, professionals getting together. They can be a resource to one another who wants to start a community rating system within their community. Again, we're looking at what does APC look like in the next 10 years, right? Long-term range of planning, continued coordination, collaboration, communication. We don't want an authority over the water. We basically want to collaborate and have this collaborative watershed management, working with levee districts and drainage districts, our soil and water conservation districts. They're a resource for our farmers. Every parish has a soil and water conservation district. This is funded by the legislature and coordinated with Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry and USDA, the National Resources Conservation Service. We have 400 entities in our region that deal with water. This is a lot of entities to collaborate. We don't want to duplicate efforts. We just want to basically do the work that no one's doing now, filling in those gaps in services. And I'm almost out of time, but I also wanted to say we want to seek out funding for operation and maintenance of projects. This is also really important because grants don't pay for operation and maintenance of projects. Last, I'll leave you with another quote, not Helen Keller, but someone named Mark Davis, and I love this. He says, if you regionalize the burden because you can regionalize the benefits. Thank you.
Stand up because I have a lot of buttons. All right. Oh. Perfect. How's everybody doing? It's the afternoon. You have that lunch lull. You're trying not to fall asleep. I know the feeling. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Jessica again, Jessica Dandridge. I'm with the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans. I'm just gonna bounce on into it because we have a lot to talk about. Some of you guys may have heard of us, maybe you have not, but we are a nonprofit and we bridge resources and information and we work at the intersection of public, private, and nonprofits to really ensure communities can live and thrive with water. And we really focus on equitable practices to sustainably do that, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And the how is one, education and advocacy. We call it wholesale education. We don't actually do certifications in K through 12. People just need to know how their water systems work. and our focus is on people. Also, our second and probably most popular thing that we do is policy work, which we'll talk again more about soon. But we do policy work at the local level, state and federal level. And finally, equity. And what we talk about, equity can mean anything in any particular setting, but what we're talking about is ensuring Louisiana residents have a seat at the table and ensuring that they are part of the economic benefits of the blue-green economy. So in that photo, which you can't fully see behind, is a photo of the Great Flood of 1927. And I think it's a good point to really think about the relationship between water and people. If you were to look behind the words, there is a building, a house in the middle of the water, and the tree is holding the fort. And that's what we think about. How do we think about the relationship between water, people, built environment, and our natural ecology? Our greatest opportunity and our greatest threat is water. You guys know that, that's why you're here. But one of the things that we really try to think about is how to create innovative solutions. We've been doing the same thing for quite a long time. We've been thinking about water in the same ways, and this is a result. We figured out how to do Twitter, we figured out how to make electric cars, but we can't seem to figure out how to fix a catch basin. Why? What's the problem? Where is the gap? That's what we think about. Our whole job is to think about those gray areas, those middle areas that are hard to figure out. Maybe that requires nonprofits, maybe that requires regular everyday people. Maybe the solution is just talking to a government agency and digging a little bit deeper. That's what we do. We do a lot of things. I'm not going to go through all of that, but just some highlights. We actually wrote and advocated for the New Orleans City Stormwater Code, which is now built into the building code. It is a requirement now. We helped to really move forward the first ever water affordability pilot program. And then we're currently working on quite a lot of projects, including co-leading the city to do lead service line abatement. So we have a lot of projects on our list and a lot of demand for the things that we do. A little bit more about how we got here, where the Water Collaborative came from. You guys know New Orleans was founded in 1718. I don't have to give you that. We all took Louisiana history. But then Hurricane Katrina happened, and that was a changing moment, especially for me. Hurricane Katrina hit the day before my 16th birthday. I'm born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana, and my entire life changed. I thought I was going to be an anthropologist. Here I am. And furthermore, it changed the way I saw the world. Why aren't people included? And who makes the big decisions about the things that affect us in our everyday lives? Jeanette didn't go through all of it, but just to give a little bit of sense of why I'm here to talk to you guys about this is I studied political science sociology and my master's in international security with a focus on urbanization and climate resilience. But I had started, after Katrina, at age 16, I started working in nonprofits and never looked back since. So I've worked for well over 20 nonprofits on both local campaigns and national campaigns. And from working with food justice to incarcerated teens, all the way to democratizing a rural electric co-op in over 15 counties in Alabama. So my journey starts here, and so does the Water Collaborative. Jeanette mentioned the Dutch dialogues, which created the Urban Water Plan, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the Water Collaborative was created out of that to keep the principles moving, thriving and living with water. There was a big moment for us. In 2016, the city of New Orleans was awarded $141 million to retrofit communities with green infrastructure. That money is still being put out right now. And then finally, Keely already talked about the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, which is kind of the pinnacle of what the entire urban water plan was about, working along parish lines and outside of parish lines to manage our water systems. Next year, the urban water plan makes 10 years, y'all. That's a long time. And I thought about this conversation, what have we learned in 10 years? Have we learned anything? Has Louisiana or New Orleans learned much? This is a quote from one of the documents. In finding the means to thrive in a place of economic and cultural importance, but one of weak soils and ecological instability, Greater New Orleans can become a world leader in climate adaptive design and water resource management. Sounds real nice, sounds real utopian. But one thing I noticed in this is that there's no people. There's no dogs, there's no cats, there's no cars, a lot of really great designs. But where do we center this work? we don't do this work because we are trying to just make really cool cities. We do this work because we're trying to make sure people can thrive, that they can live in a better environment. One thing I will also say is that we have to see variation and work on the world that we're building in a different way. So how do we go beyond design? How do we go beyond that, right? So I had a lot of different things, and this slide deck could have been about 60. I tried my best to keep it low. But those are the 4 things I want you guys to take away. Strategic collaboration, community and self-determination, moving from resilience to thriving, and integrated water resource management. So what are we talking about? So Keely had talked a little about collaboration, and I laughed to myself. I said, anytime you say collaboration, people are like, oh my God, I got to work with people who I don't like. And so I thought about these memes. I am a millennial. And I thought, this is probably how you guys probably feel about this at work. Like, oh, great. I have to talk to that office who they don't want to talk to me, who's in charge. This one was a good one, too. One person does all the work. The other person disappears until the day of. We all know that feeling. Teamwork, getting all the blame for everyone's mistakes. So we want to look at collaboration a little bit differently. Collaboration doesn't have to mean the same thing. In New Orleans, one thing that they're doing to move the urban water plan, how they got there, how are we spending this $141 million? We're leveraging it through public-private partnerships. To the top left, that is a program called the Front Yard Initiative, where they work with the city to remove people's concrete and put in green infrastructure. You also see Greenlight New Orleans, which installs rain barrels and puts beautiful designs and art on them, so it gives people an incentive to install. At the bottom left, you see Groundworks New Orleans, who teaches young people, incarcerated teens, how to install green infrastructure, and they start at $15 an hour and upwards of 30. And at the bottom, you see the Water Challenge, where they challenge businesses that normally would just cut grass and install landscaping to do green infrastructure. That was last year's winner, who was just a guy who cut grass, and now he can put in green infrastructure. And finally, NORA has programs where you can buy out lots and turn them into stormwater lots, turn them into rain gardens, turn them into community gardens, et cetera. I'm putting this on here. This was a photo of the city from the river. And one thing that we're doing to really talk more about collaboration and really put truth to power here is we're launching for the first ever, this is the first time anybody's heard of this, so you have the first scoop, is we're launching with the City of New Orleans the first ever community engagement framework. So requiring all contractors to have the same level of community engagement, the base level. That shouldn't be a novel idea, but it is quite novel. Not just saying, I had 2 meetings and 2 people showed up, so I did my job. You did not do your job. No one knows what your project is about. They don't know what you're doing. So we're actually creating something using citizen science, using IC Change's technology that will actually allow residents to put in project ideas and build off of that using the things that they see. And instead of the city applying for money that they think they need, they'll apply for money that the citizens ask for. A novel concept. So when we're talking about cultivating a culture of collaboration, I love this scene here, it's Ratatouille. And my grandfather was a chef from Jamaica, and I grew up in his kitchen. And the kitchen always worked. Everybody knew their job, but also everybody knew that they had to depend on one another to get what they're doing done. You can't have that bowl of soup if you didn't have the 2 sous chefs and the guy cleaning. It's the same thing with collaboration. You cannot just assume that people's voices are not important. That's like assuming the sous chef is not important, or the guy washing the dishes is not important. Everyone matters. So the first thing is sustaining long-term relationship building. One thing we're working with the city is to say, you need a community engagement office, not a portion of a contract. Additionally, build it into your budget, whether that's your city budget, your contractor's budget. Building it into your budget is going to make a huge difference. Go to your partners. This is a huge one. Don't invite them. You go to them. Go to their church. Go to their community center. Go to their house. That's a novel concept, but it shouldn't be. They're right around the corner. For every extraction, invest back into the community. That's one of the biggest complaints I get is that they came here, they asked for my opinions, and then I never saw them again. If you're going to go into a community, give something back. And sometimes that could be a gift card. Sometimes that is actually a project. Or maybe it's something smaller. but always give back because they're giving to you. They're trusting you to do the job that you're supposed to do. I mentioned you don't need all the cooks in the kitchen. This is a huge thing too. Some people go hard on collaboration. I invited 300 people to the room. Now you're not gonna get anything done. Be strategic about your collaboration. Who do you need? Or who are the partners that can connect you to all the people that you need to know? This is really interesting too, intentional listening. One thing I always tell people is when you're working with a community, and I'm gonna use the two together, breaking bread together, just go and don't tell them anything about the project. Just listen to their stories. Don't ask them, what can you do for me? Or what do you think of this project that's 40% done? Just listen to what they have to say. Create relationships, create bonds, because in future projects, they can be an asset to you. Collaboration is about long-term investment. It is not short-term. And these are strategies on how to do that. So, part 2, you collaborated. Moving from colonization to self-determination. Hold on to your bootstraps, people. So here, I have lots of slides, guys. I'm gonna read a quote here. So this is what we expected, right? This is normally how infrastructure was made. A few people in a room that don't look like me, but they're making decisions for everyone. And it's still made like this today. Now, obviously, you guys don't look like that. But the point being is the relationship between people and infrastructure has always been separate. We know best. We know what's best for you. But is that true? Do we really know what's best for everybody? The systems have been built to harm and disfranchise and take away voices of the people. Yet the people carry the biggest burden. We talked about flooding. My family lived through Katrina, lived through Betsy, lived through Camille. So whose fault is that? Is it them because they lived in the lower 9th Ward or the 7th Ward or the 9th Ward? Or is it the people who built the levee system, who created it? But who gets the blame at the end of the day? The residents. Additionally, we also want to think about how we've built this land and changed it and created systems, again, without community voice involved at any level. So now the Louisiana we know was created without anyone's input in this room. We had no input on where the levees went, where the buildings went, where the canals went, where the drains went, or how they worked. To that point, that's why we're really interested, and I want to really point out the importance of self-determination theory. I personally was brought on, I was angry about what was happening after Hurricane Katrina. Everything I had was gone. Everybody in my family lost everything. And I wanted to do something. And a small nonprofit said, we are working to teach kids how to run their own organization and organize for themselves. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those 2 adults who taught me everything. That's the point about working with people and having long-term benefit. It changed my perspective of government, but it also changed my perspective of my relationship to government. The thing about self-determination theory, and there's lots of videos and you can read every article about it, but the takeaways is autonomy, competence, and connection. You want to make sure people have autonomous voice or vote in the things that they see. They want to have competence, education. How do I learn about these things? Don't just go to people with a design that's 60% complete and be like, you like it? They're going to say no, or they're just going to lie to you. They don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what this means in terms of my relationship to the land. And what we're seeing in New Orleans, they had a huge project, a hazard mitigation project, several millions of dollars that was canceled because people didn't understand what it was doing. They threw the project out the window. So the work of the engineers, the work of the landscape architects mean nothing. That's not what we want. And the last thing is connection. They built a connection with me on their self-determination theory. They may have not even realized that that's what they were doing, but that's exactly what they were doing. So this is being done right now in New Orleans. I'm using St. Anthony Green Streets as an example. It's one of the projects out of the 141 million Gentilly Resiliency District projects. It's a neighborhood in Gentilly, mostly Black, mostly poor, mostly middle class, along the levee system. And it's exactly where the levee system breached. So they decided, we're going to do this in a different way. They use community outreach on a large scale. So you can see here, they had discussions, community dinners, that's at Breaking Bread, Gatto, meet and greet. I'm just here to tell you I'm the engineer. This is my name, this is my face. These are some of the photos that you see here, community input, community feedback. I'm not gonna go through it, you can look it up online, Batcher Engineering LLC, that's the name of the company, but it's very widespread. So how do we do this? Create space for residents to participate from start to finish, education and water literacy. When you go in, don't just say, here's a project, but what is the project? Why are they doing this project? What does it connect to? What does it not connect to? Integrate programs in residents' everyday lives. Go to them. That's going back to and hearkening back to that. Building trust and being vulnerable. That's hard. We probably can't even do that with our own family members. But you have to be able to do that with the people, at least on this level. And then also residents choosing design aspects. And the beautiful thing about green infrastructure, it doesn't have to be crazy large. You'd be like, hey, we want some trees in the neighborhood. Where do you want the trees to go? Hey, we want some rain barrels. Where do you want them to go? Who should get them? It's very simple. It just means thinking about it differently. Moving from resilience to thriving. I'm gonna move a little quickly because I knew I was gonna go over. But again, here we are at the same space. The idea of Louisiana being resilient kind of feels like a joke to me. This is photos from the flood of 1927, and these are photos from the last 10 years. There's Katrina, there is the flood of 2016, there's the flood of St. Tammany. We are not resilient. Sorry to break it to you. This is a recent article of Ashley Shelton of the Mr. ON Coalition, but she says, we cannot excuse the suffering of marginalized people as a matter of fate. It is a matter of political will for equality and justice. So with that being said, here we go. The 4 R's of resilience. I learned this back in undergrad, and I always thought about it. It's actually about earthquakes, but it's extremely relevant to what we're doing. To create resilience, you need resources, rapidity, redundancy, and robustness. It's a great article. It's called, see if I can find it here. It's not in my notes, but I'll be happy to share it afterwards. I want to read an excerpt from what she said also. So now, Louisiana sits at the crossroads of devastation. The trifecta of pain is threatening lives, livelihoods, and livability. While this crisis impacts everyone, it will have disproportionate impact on women, especially Black women, families with low wealth, and persons living in poverty. These communities must therefore be at the center of recovery. They cannot be pushed to the side by contractors who charge too much and deliver too little, nor should they be held in abeyance by elected officials who have honed their public speeches but not their follow-through. Recovery must include and then, indeed, be driven by people closest to the pain. And with that being said, I told this at a recent conference, we need to cancel the word resilience, and I'm using that word for real. Because that's not what people are. We're not resilient. We have not gotten these 4 R's. Name anything in Louisiana that can meet those things. I challenge you, not many. We need to get to thriving. Thriving means we've met all 4 of those. Resilient is we met one of those. And I will use this quote also. He's an author, and I really admire some of his work. Resilience is all about being able to overcome the unexpected. Sustainability is about survival, and the goal of resilience is to thrive. So when you're thinking about this work, thinking really deeply about how we are making decisions, is it really resilient, or are we trying to aim for thriving? The last thing I'm going to talk about is integrated water management. And let me back up a little bit and just say there's a lot on this topic, but the reality is that Louisiana does not have enough integration. We have a lot of data. We know when people flood, FEMA has data, but we're not integrating that data. That slows down government and it confuses people. So related to the conversation they had this morning about energy, it's the same thing. We have to bring our systems together so we're not duplicating efforts, we're not wasting resources, and we're not wasting people's time. This is serious. So one thing we're doing right now in New Orleans is we're leading the stormwater fee, which I mentioned. I'm not gonna get into it, what a stormwater fee is, but basically making an equitable funding system. We're so excited about this process, not only because of what the benefits are, right? Green debt financing, pocket parks, scales, nonprofit partnerships, there's so many benefits, obviously funding, but it's the how we're doing it. We have so far We haven't even started the phase 2, which is the engagement part, and we've already engaged over 200 partners. Start early. I can't believe how many times I've seen projects where people start 3 months before and they show up with a policy in hand. What are you doing? Who did you talk to? That's unacceptable. Additionally, we have multiple thought partners. It's okay to listen to different perspectives. The Prevention Institute is based in LA. They pass a stormwater fee. I listen to what they have to say. Water Now Alliance is based in San Francisco. They are a professional organization, nonprofit, but they focus on the policies, working with businesses, working with different people to get to the final outcome. And finally, what I'm going to end on is the strategy. This is what we're doing. And I want you guys to take away from that is that it's multiple phases. It's not 5 meetings in the same place at the same time. We're doing community workshops. We're going to be mapping leaders. We're not going to actually be mapping regular places. Who are the leaders? Where are the coffee shops? Where do people gather? And we're going to be doing workshops there, not in door knocking. I hate door knocking. You know, you're in your like bathrobe and someone's like, hey, you want to talk about this politician? No. I was watching TV. So survey listening sessions. Really listening to people, that whole concept of just listening. When you talk about water in Louisiana, people have collective trauma. They never just talk about the systems. They talk about my grandmother died, my mother died, I lost everything I owned. They cannot get to where you want them to get without you taking that intentional listening seriously. And we're doing an aggressive media campaign. I have to be honest, and everybody in this room should be honest. We have a low education rate here in Louisiana. That's a shame. I'm not here to fix that. I wish I could. But how do people learn? Through radio, through television, utilizing those resources, and finally, community canvassing by district, working with city council members, and so on. So thank you so much. I hope that you guys had a few takeaways from the conversation. And that right there is me and my 17 interns over the summer doing exactly that. We did work along the Mississippi River testing for water quality. So it is possible. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much. I think we have time for a couple of questions. Okay, there's a hand up. I'm gonna ask that the microphone be brought so that you can be audible. 1 second, please.
As you were talking and showing your slides, I remembered sometime in COVID, what COVID did is totally messed up my time frame for everything. But the Greater New Orleans Foundation published this, what I thought when I found it online, and I guess I'm on their mailing list because I used to write grants, and this magnificent work on water and the resource in New Orleans, downtown, all the things they did. And unfortunately, it's too big to email it to all the people I'd like to email it to. But I emailed the link. But I would imagine, you're familiar with that work, I would imagine that there wasn't much community input on that because it was a work of consultants. And if you're in city planning and you're trying to deal with water, you should go look at it because it has some beautiful solutions. And New Orleans is where the water's comes for us. So it is a great resource. Do you think it's useful, though, in your work?
Okay. Yes. It is useful. I learn from everyone, right? And I learn from planners. I talk to a lot of engineering firms all the time, but it's one piece of the puzzle. That's how I think of it. Okay, these experts said this, and this is what their experience is, but there's no better experience than the people who live and will use your product, whether that be the streets, the bike lanes, stormwater mitigation, any of those projects. The people who are going to use it are going to be your best people to talk to. So in short term, I agree with you also. The urban water plan, I don't know if I got to that. There was no people in it, but they actually was no people involved in the 300-page document. It's a beautiful document. Really smart people did it. People that I work with to this day. And I said, do you guys never thought of showing the pictures to anybody? They said, nope, never thought about it. So that's a very colonized way of thinking, right? I'm top down, I'm an expert. You know, the bottom person doesn't really know anything. That's 100% not true. So in short, I do think it's an important resource, but it's not the only resource.
You have one question there?
You knew I needed it. My name's Jeff Rue. I live in Amod in St. Charles Parish. I was in the Navy for 25 years, retired, came back to St. Charles Parish. I taught at the Naval Academy in 75 to 78. One of the problems at the Naval Academy at the time was water collection on the waterfront. Our building was in engineering. What they did was they pulled up all the cement and they put in a little disc to help the water get down. All that worked. Nowadays, you see that being done in New Orleans and some other places in New York. Things. Now that's 78. There's no, you know, so anyway, come back to AMA, and then we had Katrina. We evacuated. We didn't have any damage at home, but you couldn't get into New Orleans. And the Cajun Navy actually basically saved New Orleans on the lakefront from people robbing them. Robbers coming in from Mobile or Florida, robbing all the Canal Street things. The other thing I didn't see was the use of barges to evacuate the people at the convention center and the Super Bowl. All they had to do was get some tugboats, configure the barges safely, because he couldn't get the buses in to get them out. They could have walked over the convention center. They could have put them on the barges, taken them upriver, not too far, and they wouldn't have had all the shootings on the bridge and other things that happened. But they just didn't have the mental, out-of-the-box thought process. Now, do you see that in planning nowadays? No. Do you see it in St. Charles Parish? If we lose the Hale-Boggs Bridge, we have now water on both sides, and there's the interconnectability. But if we don't have ferries. So if we need to get people, firefighters and stuff, from the East Bank to the West Bank, so and such, then you would have some sort of means to do that. We don't right now. It's been in writings to, officials. That's about it right now.
I have one question, if I may ask Kelia. You talked about the importance of the gauge network and your efforts in Acadiana region. What exactly does the gauge network do, and why is it important?
Okay. Yes, thank you. So the main goal for the gauge network, like after the 2016 floods, was to get some data. Data to inform our local elected officials when something is flooding. So that's basically was the start of it, for our local officials to use that. Like we had the Public Works Director, St. Martin Parish, said this would be great if we had a gauge here and here. That way I can put out signs that this road is closed, or to notify people this road may potentially flood during this time and have an alternate route. So that was like the basis of it and how it started. Yes.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of our time. I do want to alert you to the fact that in 5 minutes we actually will use the material that are on some of the desks. It's the What Are You Gonna Do game. I encourage y'all to hang around and play it with us, but it is practicing or playing what we were just talking about, collaborating to make decisions, and we'll give more detailed instructions at the first part of the next session. But it is about what the options are for water management, because we heard a lot about how to come up with projects and implement them just now, but this is what you can do. And so What Are You Gonna Do is starting in 5, and I hope you're gonna stay here and play with us.